Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking all things complexion. My husband and I were planning last night, and we sometimes go through video ideas and he just kind of lets me think out loud, and we kind of came to this conclusion that so many people when it comes to makeup are really afraid of a cakey foundation base. In my opinion, in the past I've noticed a kind of all or nothing mentality when it comes to foundation just among my family and friends. Either they don't wear that much foundation because they already have really great skin, or they feel like they don't need makeup, which is fine. So that's on one spectrum. And then there's the other side, which is where I usually am and definitely was before my acne cleared up, of people with problematic skin, where it's like foundation is a source of confidence. And I'm so happy that there is makeup, because when you have problem skin days or weeks or months or years, in my case, foundation is something that can help boost your confidence. And I just wanted to create a video kind of focusing on the complexion, where I want to show you guys how to find that happy medium. No matter what skin day you have, I want to show you guys how to adjust your routine depending on what your skin needs. And also, if it is a day or a week or months where you need more full coverage, there's a way to do it that's not going to look cakey, that's not intimidating, and it just takes a few steps to get your makeup to look really, really flawless. I'm like passionate about creating really flawless looking skin using makeup. There's ways to do it. It doesn't always have to look like you're wearing makeup. The goal here is when people see you to say, oh my gosh, your skin looks amazing. And these are all the tips that get those compliments for me. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I hope you guys are excited. Let's just dive right into it. First and foremost, and I used to not care about this back in the day, but the more I've practiced using makeup and since starting my beauty channel, I've really noticed a huge difference in prepping the skin. I cannot emphasize this enough. Even if you're in a rush in the morning, it's really important to do something to your skin to just prime it and prep it and hydrate it for makeup. So for me today, I splashed my face with water. I just kind of rinsed off any like residue from my nighttime skincare routine. I don't always use a cleanser in the morning. I personally feel like if my skin feels pretty balanced, there's no reason to strip away any of those natural oils that my face created throughout the night. So I usually just kind of rinse everything off. I'll pat it dry, and then I usually go in with a vitamin C serum, which helps kind of brighten the skin. I then go in with a moisturizer, and then I always follow it up with a sunscreen. So that's basically my morning routine. I will sometimes also put an eye cream on. Sometimes I forget, or sometimes I'm running too late where I don't, so I'll just bring the moisturizer up under my eyes. But I wanted to tell you that because that's what's going on my skin right now, and you can see how it already looks really hydrated. I finished my skincare routine probably like an hour and a half ago, so it's had time to really sink in. If you've just applied moisturizer after your skincare routine and you need to go into makeup right after, you honestly could just go straight into makeup, and having that moisturizer base is really, really going to help with the foundation. I did, however, want to show you a primer that you could apply on top of your normal skincare routine that's going to help the makeup even further. For me personally, I like to use something that's going to be hydrating but not too heavy. My skin type is combination, so I do get a little bit oily in the T-zone and I'm a little bit drier on the cheeks. That doesn't stop me from hydrating the face. Even though I do have some oil production in the T-zone, I still hydrate, but for me, I like something that's going to be a little bit more lightweight and not feel too heavy on the skin. So for today's tutorial, I'm going to be using the Pixi Rose Flash Balm. The reason why I like this is because it's a moisturizer, primer, and a mask in one. I've actually never used it as a face mask. I have other face masks that I like to use, but I like the idea of a hydrating primer. Another option that's really good that I've liked in the past is the Laura Mercier Hydrating Primer. Again, just try out what you have. Don't be afraid to try new things and try new techniques. I feel like sometimes new products and new steps can be intimidating, but they really don't have to be. So I'm just gonna go ahead, I almost ate that. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this all over the skin. And I like this because it has almost like a gel-like consistency mixed with a moisturizer consistency. So I feel like it preps the skin super nicely. By the way, you guys, I'm gonna be recommending certain products throughout the tutorial, but this does not mean this is the only product you should be using. If you have something you love at home, stick to it. And also keep in mind that we all have different skin types and skin concerns. So as I go through this, adjust what I'm saying to what you need in your life and with your skin. So that's just something to keep in mind. I love how this feels. I like how hydrating it feels, but it also kind of leaves the skin a little bit tacky, which is great for makeup application as far as longevity goes. All right, so now I feel like my skin is super prepped and ready for makeup. When it comes to foundation, the number one thing that will help avoid a cakey outcome, I guess, is using light layers. Whether you decide to use a liquid foundation, a cream foundation, or a powder foundation, starting out with hydrating the skin and then going in with light layers is gonna really make the world of a difference. For foundation today, I'm gonna be using the L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Fresh Wear Foundation. I have the shade 420, and I always like to pump it on the back of my hand first. That way you have way more control, especially if it's something that you're kind of new to, if you're just trying out foundation or you're new to this type of routine. Definitely try it out on the back of your hand first. Don't go directly onto the skin. You're gonna end up with way too much product. And then as you get familiar with how much foundation you normally use, you can of course pump it right onto the brush or whatever, but I personally always pump it onto the back of my hand. And then I take my Real Techniques buffing brush and I'm just gonna dip it really lightly into the product. I'm not putting all of the product on the brush either. There's still some foundation on the back of my hand. So now I'm gonna go ahead and start to kind of distribute this all over the skin. I personally like to start in the center of the face, but I know some people that start along the jawline and work inwards. I have discoloration all over the skin, so really I prefer to have coverage everywhere. But again, just assess your own situation and apply the coverage where you feel like you need it most. And you'll notice that I haven't dipped back into the foundation on the back of my hand yet, and that's because I'm really trying to work in the thinnest amount of layers possible when it comes to foundation. It's also always key to blend it down the neck so you avoid that dreaded foundation line. Now I'm going back in and getting a little bit more product, and I'm just taking a look at where I personally would like a little more coverage, which for me is usually on the cheeks. So I'm just gonna go ahead and build it up there. Same thing on this side. And because I hydrated the face beforehand, I really can feel a difference blending out the foundation onto the skin. I can feel it mixing into the skincare and primer that I have underneath, which helps everything sink into the skin a little bit better, and it also helps blend everything out. Which blending is key no matter what you're doing, whether it's foundation, concealer, powder, bronzer, highlighter. Blending your makeup out is really what's gonna make it look natural, and it is so key to the end result. Next, I'm gonna go into my beauty blender, and I'm gonna take what's left on the back of my hand, and the reason why I do this is because it creates a small layer of foundation on the sponge, which will help it not absorb too much of the coverage, since I do want to keep the full coverage. If you feel like you've applied a little bit too much and you want less coverage, don't do that. You want to use a clean damp sponge and go back in with that, and that will help kind of take up any excess foundation. I don't know if I mentioned this enough in my videos, but every single time I'm using a sponge, it is damp. I run it under water, I squeeze out all the extra water, and then it's ready to use. Using a damp sponge is also so key in creating a beautiful, flawless, natural looking base. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this and I'm gonna go ahead and press the rest of the foundation into the skin. And this pressing motion is, first of all, gonna warm up the product against the skin, which will melt it even further and will help make it look more skin-like. And second of all, like I mentioned before, because we're using a sponge, it is gonna take up any extra foundation. Again, since I did the layer, it's not gonna take up too much, but that just allows the skin to have the perfect amount of foundation left behind. Something I've also been recently doing when it comes to pressing the foundation into the skin is I press it in a little bit more firmly than I used to. I used to think that if I pressed in the foundation too much that all the coverage would come off. That's not the case. And I've actually noticed a big difference when I take the time to really apply pressure to the skin when you're using a beauty blender. It seriously makes the biggest difference. I also wanted to mention, because my skin has improved over the past 2 years or so, and if you're somebody who has a lot of active breakouts and who has a lot of discoloration, believe me, I've been there. It's frustrating, I get you, but I also feel like there's so many great products that can help you achieve a really flawless finish without layering up too much foundation. And I wanted to share this particular foundation because it's so versatile, and I wish I had this back in high school. Honestly, it is so fabulous. I've talked about this a couple times, but it's the Dermablend Flawless Creator Multi-Use Liquid Pigments. This is basically straight pigment. The thing I love about this most is you can mix it into foundations, you can mix it with a moisturizer to create your own tinted moisturizer, or you can use it on its own, which I've done before, and you only need the tiniest amount to get maximum full coverage. The thing with some full coverage foundations, especially when you have problem areas around the whole entire face, is, for me at least, I found myself kind of getting a little bit overzealous with the amount of foundation that I was using, because I thought, oh, I have a lot to cover up, I need to use a lot lot to cover it up. And that's not always the case, especially with products like this. Using a thin layer of a highly concentrated pigmented product is going to really help to smooth and even out the skin tone. And then I'm going to show you in a second how to use concealer to spot conceal the areas that are still showing through versus adding another complete layer of foundation. So I did want to mention that product for those of you who feel like you might not be able to use the thinnest amount of foundation every day, which I totally understand. And I know that there are people like that out there, and I still have to do that sometimes. Right now my skin's pretty good. I've still got some blemishes, which is good because I can show you guys how to spot conceal those. Hopefully this is picking up on camera. Truly, I feel like even though I've got foundation on, it doesn't look heavy on the skin. And again, that's attributed to prepping the skin and then blending it out properly and using a sponge. I do feel like investing in good tools really makes a difference. You do not have to buy a super high-end tool to get those results. In fact, this Real Techniques buffing brush is a drugstore brush and I love it. The Real Techniques sponge is a great drugstore option. If you do want to splurge a little bit more, I for some reason love the Blue Beauty Blender. I feel like it works better. I feel like this was limited edition. I'm not sure if it's still around. And then you guys probably know the Thrive Cosmetic sponge is also my favorite. So if you do want to spend a little bit more money, I do see a slightly better result with the higher end sponges, but like I said, you do not need to buy a higher end one to achieve the same look. I'll have everything I'm talking about listed and linked down below because I'm going to be talking about quite a few things as we go along. Alright, so after that layer of foundation, I'm going to step back and assess the situation again. For me, I feel like my skin overall looks nice and even toned. I'm not looking to really create a mask. I can still see my skin through in some areas. However, I do want to make it even more flawless by taking care of some of these blemishes that are still showing through. So that's where spot concealing with concealer comes in. And as I was choosing products for this tutorial, I wanted to use this concealer. It's not a new concealer to me at all, and I've talked about it several times, but if there was just one concealer that I would recommend to literally everyone, it's this. It's the Laura Mercier Flawless Fusion Concealer. Again, you guys, there are amazing concealers at the drugstore, but I really wanted to share this one with you because this concealer gives maximum coverage, does not feel heavy or dry, does not crease underneath my eyes. It looks so skin-like. It's one of my absolute favorite concealers, if not my very favorite concealer. I always get two shades in a concealer that I love, one for underneath the eye area to brighten, and then one that matches my skin tone for blemishes. I'm gonna go ahead and cover up the blemishes first using the shade 2N, and I'm just gonna do a little dot on top of that blemish, one on top of that blemish, and again, I'm not looking to create an extremely uniform tone necessarily. Do I do that sometimes? Sure, for more glam looks, but on an everyday basis, you know, if there's a blemish over here that's kind of peeking through, but it's not too obvious, I honestly will just leave it alone. Sometimes it is scary to leave blemishes alone and leave your skin showing through in some areas, but it's important to note that that also adds to the realistic effect, and it also adds to the end result not looking heavy or cakey. So I'm just blending that out with the same exact sponge, and I'm making sure to really just bounce it right on top of the area that I'm wanting to conceal. And then once that's blended out, I will kind of blend out the edges a little bit, but you really don't want to be using wiping motions because you want to keep that coverage right on the spot you're trying to cover up. Okay, so the blemishes are a little bit more concealed. I'm gonna let this one set a little bit. That is a trick that I like to do sometimes. If I have a super stubborn one, sometimes I will do one layer and let it kind of dry down, and then we'll go back in and see if we can conceal it a little bit more. While we wait for that, I'm gonna go ahead and do the under eye area. For the under eyes, I like to apply it right where I have darkness. And again, using small layers, less is always more, because you can always add more concealer. You can always add more foundation. It is way harder to remove it. So it's always something that I keep in mind. I'm just gonna go ahead and do like 4 little marks, and I do like to put concealer right here. I feel like that's an area that's kind of neglected and a lot of us have darkness there. Using the same sponge, I'm gonna go ahead and start to blend this out. And I'm blending it out underneath the eye first, and then I'm dragging it up toward the bottom of the eye. The eye area is so delicate, and it's also an area where if you apply too much makeup, it's going to add to that cakey look, which is not what we want. You can still get coverage though, and this is how I do it. I just like to put it right on where I know I need the coverage, then I blend it, and then I move it up toward the bottom of the eye. That way, you don't have tons of product in these fine lines here. And using a beauty blender in this situation also helps to take away too much product, which will also help with creasing. So I'm just gonna continue to blend this out underneath the eye. Now I'm gonna go back in with the darker concealer and see if I can conceal that a little bit more. Oh, another trick that I learned a long time ago, if you don't have 2 different shades of concealer, say you only have one for underneath the eye area, and then you get a blemish that you want to conceal. I don't know if this foundation is really a good example of this, maybe. But you know how certain foundations, if it has a cap like this, there can be some foundation buildup on the side of the bottle that kind of hardens a little bit. That actually is a really good concealer in those emergency situations where you might not have one that matches your skin tone. Since it's your foundation just a little bit dried out, it actually makes a really great concealer. So that's a good way to just take your finger and kind of dab over the blemish. I used to do that all the time, so I wanted to share that with you guys in case you're in a situation where you don't have a concealer to match your skin tone. Because you certainly don't want to use the one for underneath your eyes. It can highlight the blemish instead of conceal it. All right, before we move on, I just want to make sure that I'm happy with everything. I really do like how everything looks. I do have a little bit of discoloration on the eyelid, so I'm just going to take what's left on my sponge and blend that out across the rest of the eyelid. And here's how everything's looking, foundation and concealer. I just wanted to show you guys, you can still see my skin, but I'm really happy with how much more even toned it looks. Next, we're gonna go ahead and powder the face. Choosing the right powder is really important, especially if you need to set your concealer underneath the eyes and you have a lot of fine lines and wrinkles. Using something that's gonna be finely milled is really gonna help with that. And also using less will help it not look so cakey. This right here is one of my favorite powders for when I want my skin to be set, but I don't want it to look super makeup-y. This is from Glossier. It's their Wowder powder, and I have mine in the shade G11 to G12. Before I go into powder underneath the eye area, I like to take my sponge and just kind of dab out any extra concealer that has sunk into the smile lines. Otherwise, you're gonna lock in the concealer that's in the smile lines. So I always like to make sure to do this. I'm gonna use a pressing motion with a smaller brush and set the under eye concealer. And then I take a larger powder brush. And again, since I feel like I need coverage on the cheeks, I like to lock in the makeup here. The less powder you use, the more dewy and natural things are gonna look. So whether you're like me and you like to set the entire face or you only set a portion of the face, it's totally up to you. I also personally feel like adding a little bit of powder everywhere helps the bronzer and the blush blend out a little bit better. But again, this is something that you should just play with at home. See what you like. See what works best for your skin type. There are no rules. Just sit down and play and see if you like to use creams or powders. And no matter what you choose to do, if you do it in light, small layers and just build it up, it's not going to be intimidating and you're not going to go overboard, and the end result is going to be very, very natural. So everything is locked in place. I personally add this step to my routine because, again, it just helps with the end result. It brings life back to the skin, and I know I've talked about this several times on my channel, but in case you're new or you want a refresher, I love to use a finishing powder of some sort. There is one from Milani that does a very similar thing to this, so I will have that link down below if you're wanting a more affordable option to achieve a similar look. This is what I'm going to use today. This is the Laura Mercier Candle Glow Sheer Perfecting Powder. I have mine in the shade 1, and I will just take the same brush that I used with the translucent powder, and I'll go ahead and dip into the product. And I first like to kind of press down on the skin, and then I go in and buff this product over the entire complexion. I'm going to do it on one side of the face first so that you guys can see the difference. Alright, so the powder was applied all over this side of the face. It's going to be a subtle difference, but to me it really helps the final look. It just adds back in that radiance to look like you almost are wearing all cream products, which I absolutely love. Obviously, both sides look pretty good. I also feel like this product helps to kind of blur any leftover imperfections. I think it's beautiful. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that to the other side of the face. This is truly one of my favorite makeup products ever. It makes everything look better. And I'm also not afraid to take this underneath the eye area a little bit. I don't go too heavy, but I do like to apply it under there just a tad because I kind of like the look of a more luminous under eye area. Okay, I'm loving how everything is looking. This next step is something that I have not always done. I actually just recently started trying out this trick over the past weekend, and it was so scary to me at first, but I do feel like it makes even more of a difference. So I'm going to show you guys this, and even though it's not something that I've been using for a long time, I'm always down to learn new tricks to make my foundation look better. So even though my sponge is still damp, it's more dry than it was when we started. So you don't want your sponge to be like dripping wet when you do this, but I will go back in over top of the powders and just press everything in. I know that I do this after I use setting spray, which we'll do it later, but at this stage in the makeup, I just feel like any powderiness that's on the skin goes away. It just pounces all the products that we have so far deeper into the skin, making it look even more realistic. But again, since the sponge is dry and since we have powders on it, it's not gonna pick any product up. I thought for sure using a damp sponge over powders would ruin the makeup, but it doesn't. So this is a new trick that I've been really, really enjoying. Wowza! Look at the complexion. It looks so fresh and so radiant. It looks flawless, yet still skin-like, and there is no sign of cakiness whatsoever. I wanted to come up close again so you guys can see the texture of the skin. It has glow to it, but there's still coverage. We still wore foundation and concealer. We did not have to get rid of either of those to achieve a very natural looking finish. So now I'm just gonna move quickly through a few more makeup steps, and then we'll go into my very favorite step of the routine that will really help to take your foundation and complexion to the next level. I'm gonna warm up the complexion with the Honest Beauty bronzer. This is the Luminizing Glow Powder in the shade Dusk Reflection. This does have a little bit of a luminosity to it, so it's going to add to the glow. If you're someone who has a little bit more texture on the cheeks, it's usually better to stick to more mattifying products. So in that situation, I would reach for a more matte or satin bronzer finish. And that's also something to keep in mind when it comes to the finishing powders. If you have a lot of texture, you may want to skip this step or just apply it to the areas that are a little bit more smooth. Use something that's a little bit more mattifying, and I will show you guys how to really melt it in at the end of this video. You'll still get a very natural effect, but it's not going to emphasize the texture that you're trying to cover. So I always like to apply bronzer into the hairline. I just think it helps things look more natural along the cheeks, down the jawline, and also down the neck. You guys probably know if you've watched any of my videos, I do like to take the brush that we used with the powder and I just blend things out, because that's one of our key steps here, is just blending, blending, blending. All right, before we finish up the face, I'm actually gonna do a quick eye look. I'm gonna be going into the ColourPop California Love eyeshadow palette. I love this, look how pretty. Starting off with the shade Gnarly, I'm just gonna go ahead and work this into the crease and blend it out toward the end of the brow as our transition shade. It's such a perfect peachy color. I seriously love this palette, you guys. So while we're using that shade, I'm gonna dip back into it with that same brush, tap off the extra, and just pinch the brush and run this along the lower lash line. Next, I'm gonna take this yellow shade right here called Sequoia, and I'm gonna start by packing that onto the lid, and then once there's less on the brush, I'm just gonna buff it into the crease a little bit to make sure everything looks nice and blended. You know, I was gonna do like more colors than this, but I'm kind of into just a wash of that kind of yellow-orange color on the lid. I am gonna deepen up the outer corner using one more shade, and that's this one right here. It's just a little bit more orangey. This is called Laguna, and I'm just gonna press this on the outer corner and then buff it into the crease a little bit. And it's just gonna create like the slightest gradient, but the focus is mostly gonna be that yellow shade that we applied all over the lid. I'm taking the brush that we used with the transition shade and I'm just buffing everything out. I didn't add any more product to it. I'm just wanting to make sure that the edges of the shadow is nice and blended. I think that's all I'm gonna do today for the eyes. Let's go ahead and pop on some mascara. I'm gonna be using the Thrive Cosmetics Liquid Lash Extension Mascara, and I'm going to apply mascara to the top and bottom lashes. Which, by the way, it's been so fun seeing you guys receive your mascaras in the mail. Those of you who won my 400,000 subscriber giveaway, I truly hope you guys love the mascara as much as I do. And it's been so fun to see your Instagram posts. You guys are seriously the best. All right, let's move on to blush. Today I'm gonna be using the Benefit Rockateur blush, and I've been kind of reaching for this all over again. The thing I like about it is it does have a little bit of a sheen to it. It's not overpowering, and this mauve tone just really helps the skin look natural. And I also love the smell. This blush seriously smells so good. I'm just gonna take that on a blush brush, and I'm going to apply it to the apples of the cheeks, blending it backward toward the ear a little bit. And I am actually going to take the eyeshadow brush that we used in the transition, and I'm gonna take that blush and just pop it right here. I feel like that just helps pull the whole look together. Amazing. Okay, I wanted to use this new highlighter. Well, it's not new at all, but it's new to me. This is the ColourPop Flexitarian Super Shock Cheek Highlighter. I've heard so many people talk about this. I've heard so many of you guys recommend this to me. So I bought it and I'm gonna try it. I actually think I'm gonna take the tip of my sponge and just dip right into this. And I'm just gonna start to press this into the skin on the high points of the face. Oh my word. Would you look at that? Oh wow. I'm gonna bring it to the front of the cheeks just to make that look a little more dewy. Ooh, that's pretty. I'm sure a lot of you guys already have this highlighter, so it's probably not, you know, anything too exciting to you, but I'm pretty excited about this. Ooh, so pretty. I always like to apply it down the center of the nose. So I'm just gonna press a little bit right here and a little on the cupid's bow. Since the Super Shock highlighter is a little bit more of a cream formula, I'm gonna take the bottom of the sponge and instead of using a brush to blend out the bronzer, blush, and highlighter, I'm just gonna press it in further with the bottom of the sponge. Things are looking good, except for not that. But that's okay. And if you guys really want to know what I do with these, I will take a powder foundation. It can be pressed or loose. I have this one sitting right here, so this is what I'm going to use. I just have the Bare Minerals Original Foundation. This matches my skin tone perfectly. I'm just going to take a little bit of this on like a small buffing brush. And I'm going to go like this. And I'm going to press and buff over it, and that will cancel it out so much better than all the other products. Look at that. Obviously, since it's a raised blemish, you can still see it, but it's not so red anymore. So that's just a little added bonus tip for you. I'm just gonna remove any foundation that got on the lips. I'm gonna take the MAC lip liner in the shade Whirl, and I'm gonna line and fill in the lips with this, which, by the way, if you have not yet seen the video where I tried out your Holy Grail makeup, I will have that link down below. This is one of the products. That was one of my favorite videos I've ever filmed, so if you haven't seen it yet, be sure to watch that. There's some really good new finds. Next, I'm gonna take this ColourPop Luxe Cream Lipstick. I was shopping on ColourPop's website and I just came across this and I thought it would be a shade that I would really like. This is in the shade Tiptoe, and I'm just gonna layer that on top of the lip liner. Very nice, very nude. I always like to take my finger with these kinds of shades, and I like to mix it in with the lip liner. And I'm just going back in with the lip liner just to fine tune the edges. So before we do the last step, as you guys know, I like to step back and assess the situation. So I'm gonna add a little bit more bronzer onto the forehead and assess the situation, as a lot of you probably know, but again, in case you don't, I always like to step back and just make sure that everything looks balanced. Sometimes when I finish the eye look and then I apply the lip color, I can see, okay, I want a little more definition in the brows. Ooh, I need a little bit more definition along the forehead with bronzer. Maybe my blush needs to be a little more intense. Maybe you want more highlighter. So it's just a time before you lock in the makeup to really make sure it's how you want it. I do this every single day. I'm gonna brush through my brows a little bit. Oh, I know, before I forget, I'm gonna take the ColourPop Flexitarian highlighter on a bit of a smaller brush, and I'm gonna use this as my inner corner highlight. And I'm gonna take what's left and just pop it right underneath the brow, just like that. Okay, now we're on our last step. This is really what's going to literally seal the deal when it comes to a fresh looking complexion. This is gonna take away any excess cakiness, any powdery finish. This is probably one of the most underrated steps in makeup. And if someone were to ask me like, what is one step that really would change my makeup game? It's this: setting spray. Setting spray, in my mind, used to be an unnecessary step. Now it is the most necessary step. Not only does it help your makeup last longer, this is really what's gonna help melt everything into the skin. Think of it as your final step to your skin sandwich, okay? Let me explain. We started off the sandwich with hydration, using moisturizer. You prepped your skin, maybe you did a hydrating primer or a primer of some sort. So that's the base layer. Then we applied the foundation, concealer, powder, finishing powder, all the other complexion products. So there's a layer of makeup now to seal it all in and to really create a natural finish. Using setting spray is gonna add moisture to the top of the skin, and you can kind of picture that sandwich. The moisturizer at the base of your skin, the setting spray at the top, both are going to kind of come closer together, and the products in between are gonna melt even more into your skin. It is so important. You can tell how passionate I am about this, okay? I personally have a pretty bougie setting routine. I use 3 different steps. I'm not gonna do that. It's not completely necessary, but I will tell you about it, just in case you wanna know. In my 3-step set routine, I go in first with something that's gonna just kind of smooth over the skin. A MAC Fix Plus is a good example of that. Smashbox Primer Water is a good example of that. I will spritz that all over the face. I will let it dry. I'll use my fan and I'll press it into the skin, and then I go into a more long-lasting setting spray like the Urban Decay All Nighter. That's my first 2 steps, and then I'll show you the last step in the end. To kind of cut down those 2 steps, I have another setting spray that I'm gonna be using. It is so good. I actually have a whole video on my 3-step set routine, so I will have that link down below. But for today, I'm just gonna use one setting spray. It is a more dewy setting spray, and this is, again, just how you would assess the situation with your own skincare and your own primer. You kind of want to do the same thing with a setting spray. If you're somebody who gets super oily, you might want to go for something that has a little bit more oil control. If you're someone who's super dry, you're going to want to go with something dewy. If you're like me and you're kind of in between, I like to use something that's going to really melt the product into the skin, and then I'll do something for the T-zone, which gets oily, which I'll show you in a second. Today we're going to be using the Catrice Prime and Fine Dewy Glow Fixing Spray. This is another one of those products that I discovered because of you guys when I tried your Holy Grail products. It is so good. It's only been a couple days of using it, but I am hooked already. I like to give it a good shake because there's actually little bits of luminous particles in here. Nothing too scary, but I just like to shake it up. And let's go ahead and spritz the whole face. And you guys, I am not shy. I will drench the complexion. This is another tool that seems unnecessary, but once you use one, you will never go back. I just got this off of Amazon. I'll have this link down below. But I like to kind of let it dry a little bit. So right now, the setting spray is sinking into the powders. When I feel like things are kind of settling down, it's not completely super damp, I go back into this handy sponge here, and I'm just gonna lightly press this time, just to make sure that the setting spray really sinks into the skin. And once everything is dried down, well, first of all, look how glowy the complexion is, you guys. I'm telling you, setting spray is everything. Now, this is also not a brand new step on my channel, okay? This is like one of my personal holy grail items. Like, this is like a desert island type of item, okay? This is the Rimmel Stay Matte Transparent Powder in the shade 001. I take this on a small brush after I've used setting spray, and this would be for those of you who get a little bit more oily in the T-zone. If you have a super dry complexion, you could totally skip this step. But if you're like me, I just like to take a little bit of this and I press it over top of the setting spray, which also kind of seems like it would be a backward step, but it's not, because since we've rehydrated the face, there's a little bit of moisture left right after setting it. So when you apply the powder, it's gonna lock it in and melt again in that layer of setting spray. So that's why it's important to do it kind of right after you set it. I do still touch up with this throughout the day. If I find myself getting oily, I will use a blotting sheet or I will use this powder to just touch up. And that keeps the shine at bay in the T-zone, but allows you to have very fresh, glowy skin everywhere else on the face, which I love. All right, I'm getting right up close to the camera again. I just really want you to see the end result of the skin. I was still able to use all the products that I wanted to, but it's not cakey. It looks so fresh. I have the coverage that I want, but using those techniques will give you such a better result. And this is the kind of situation where people are like, wow, your skin looks amazing. I love how it looks and I hope you guys do too. I hope you guys found this video to be helpful. Again, it's all about playing with makeup. Figure out what works best for you. If there's a product that I use that you don't like, use something that you do like. Next time you have a little bit of free time during the weekend or maybe during an evening, just sit down and play with what you've got. Try one tip at a time. You don't need to overwhelm yourself with a ton of new things. Just take it one thing at a time. Maybe the next time you do your makeup, you spend a little bit more time prepping the skin, or maybe you try a setting spray next time. Just see how those little things make a difference, and then once you get more comfortable, you can try new things. But these are truly the tips that I've gathered from my makeup books, from trial and error, from taking makeup masterclasses. I've kind of gathered all of these different things. I've also discovered so many of these tips by just sitting down and trying new things. A lot of these tips I stumbled upon on accident, so don't be afraid to play with makeup. Sometimes what you think might be a mistake ends up working really well and ends up being an amazing makeup trick that's gonna make your final result look that much better. Ooh girl, I almost forgot. I can't live without a brow gel, so I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this in here. This is the Benefit 24-Hour Brow Gel. I love this. It's been a staple for me for years. All right. Now we're complete. If you guys are new here, hi, my name is Allie and I would love for you to join the family. You can do so by hitting the subscribe button. And if you're already a subscriber but you want to be notified on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays when I upload, click on the bell after you subscribe and you'll get a notification every single time I post. I know I talked your ear off about complexion tips and tricks, but I truly hope that you guys learned something. Let me know in the comments below if there's any other step in makeup that you really kind of have a hard time with, or maybe you're intimidated by. I would love to sit down and share every single thing I know about whatever it is you guys need help with. I seriously am an open book. What you see me do on camera and the products you see me use on camera are the things that I use in real life. I really do value sharing every single tip and trick that I learn when it comes to makeup with you guys so that you guys can learn new things and become more confident with your makeup application at home. That's it for today's video. I love you all so much. I hope you have an amazing day wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Love you. Bye.